Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Bill Murray, and I've got Christopher Norris with me today. We're from 12 Ronnies, and we're here today. We're going to talk a little bit about startups. We're going to talk about the difference between a startup and a company, something you may not have considered in the past. Turn this off. There we go. Sorry about that. And then we're going to talk about some great failures in startup history, and we're going to talk about some of the great successes where they did some really interesting things to kind of get to where they needed to go. So, so first kind of topic today, and Chris and I will kind of talk a little bit about this, is the difference between a startup and a company. And a lot of times you'll hear people talk about, well, we're a startup company. Steve Blank, the kind of the startup guru from the University of California, has a very clear difference between what these two organizations are, and I think it's very important. In a nutshell, a startup is an organization not designed to make money, but instead tasked with discovering a business model that's scalable and repeatable. Whereas a company is an organization designed to execute on a business model. And if you think about this a little bit, those are very different types of organizations that require different types of people and skills. So with that, Chris, your thoughts on that dichotomy?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting definition. I think it is important that you've got different skill sets for launching and for essentially managing. Launching, typically there's is it the 3 H's that you need in a startup launch team, which is hustler,
hacker.
What were they? Hustler,
yeah.
Hipster,
and
what was the other one? Essentially, Apple is the and the other one was like the geek person here. But if you look it up, it's I can't off the top of my head remember. But Apple is the archetypal version of that, where you've got the hipster was kind of like Jonathan Ive, the designer. Then you've got the hustler is Steve Jobs, and then the other guy, this kind of geek person, if you think of a word beginning with H, was Steve Wozniak, who was the kind of geek behind the whole thing. So, yeah. But I guess it's a completely different skill set when you're managing a company, because you're just keeping the thing going then, aren't you? It's almost like you don't need to get the thing out of harbour. You're simply steering the ship while it's on the open sea, aren't you? So it's a different skill set.
Yeah, the 4 that I recall, and they do differ because I've looked at these online when I forget them, but I remember it was hacker, hustler, designer, and visionary. So you've got the hacker, that person
hacker. That's the hacker. Yeah. That's right. That's the one I couldn't remember. Yeah. So it's hacker, hipster, and hustler. Yeah.
Yeah, the hipster. That might be, for me, that might be the designer. The designer is that person who can kind of translate customer desires into prototypes. The hustler is the sort of the salesman of the group, the person that can sell ice to someone in the Arctic, I guess.
And they're often the front person, So
yeah, and then also kind of up front, you've got the visionary, the person who kind of sees the end at the beginning, without necessarily being too rigid, but they can look past the problems at hand into that future where the outcome for their customer is met. So yeah, those are kind of fun. And when we're talking about startup teams, it's really important to have those. But as you're saying, once you become a company, then it's totally different. Then it's where are the MBAs, where are the CEOs, where are the managers, and then there's always room for improvement. So you've got your continuous improvement group, but they're not exactly the same as that group that built the product.
There's an interesting book that was written by Frederick Laloux, which I might have mentioned previously, called the Reinventing Organizations, I think it's called. And he talks about these things called teal companies, which are essentially within organizations and startups themselves. It's having that kind of startup mentality, where things are new, you have to be agile, and flexible, how you address new ideas and things. And he was arguing that even within organizations, you need to have that mentality to stay relevant. Otherwise, you can quickly become stale and kind of irrelevant, and lose your market because people move on.
Absolutely. The skill set broadens, I think. And yeah, especially today, the old saying is that the slowest pace of change between now and the end of your life is right now. So, things aren't just changing, but they're changing at an increasing rate. Simon was asking, are solo entrepreneurs a combination of all of these sort of archetypes? So what do you think about that, Chris?
I think by necessity, I suppose, if you are on your own, then you'd need to fulfill those roles. But I guess the important thing is for somebody on their own to recognize that those are three aspects of launching a business. So, and I would imagine that you hire people as freelancers, even if or you get advice from people, if you don't naturally have those skills, or you go out there deliberately to try and find co-founders, I guess.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. At 12 Ronnies, we've got a great community there, for co-founders. So when you're able to see that, hey, there's just something I can't do here, and it's going to slow me down. That's a great time to find a co-founder, someone who can share your vision, but bring that essential skill to help you to find that repeatable, scalable business model, so that you can become a business.
I have a friend called that I don't know whether you know, Bill, but Simon certainly knows, a guy called Chris Timpson. He's a sort of techie person, and he developed this amazing app that I guess was ahead of its time, because it was showing you through AI. For example, if you wanted to redecorate a room in a house, like your living room, for example, you could show through AR what the wallpaper would look like if you decorated your room with a particular wallpaper, or you painted it a particular color. It would show you, so you could actually see in your phone what redecorating your house would look like. Brilliant idea. This was about 10 years ago. And the technology was there, and of course now I guess that's something a lot of people do. But they got sidetracked by wanting to open a retail shop. So they opened some real estate by showing people how this worked in person, and they got so bogged down with keeping the shop going that it kind of took them away from their original idea to try and scale this thing quickly.
Yeah, it sounds like it sort of torpedoed their seeking of that business model. They went kind of in a wrong direction, and it slowed everything down.
That's right. And I mean, if you're on your own, then you're more likely to make decisions that aren't actually most beneficial for your business, because you're not sharing the load with other people.
Well, yet another case for a mentor, another thing at 12ronnies.com that we offer as well. And there are mentors all around you potentially, and it's great to have that person who doesn't love your idea and your vision as much as you, to bounce those ideas off of and get that candid advice.
Yeah, and also we also within 12 Ronnies, we've got this other tool called Ideas Nest, where essentially you can share your idea and then get critiqued, in a positive way by anybody that comes across your idea. So again, if you share the fact that you want to launch a shop in the Ideas Nest thing, then somebody might tell you, well, that's you're putting the cart before the horse. You don't need to do that yet. So
yeah, and as you said, it is very positive. I've had the opportunity to evaluate a number of the ideas in Ideas Nest, and really my response is, I'm rarely the customer of any of these solutions. So really my mentoring is just a series of questions. How do you know this? How do you know that? What could you do to learn? And how could you de-risk your path forward? And those are really the kind of questions I ask, and those are the things that help keep entrepreneurs on track, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's shift gears into some of the great failures. I'm excited that you brought some of those with you today, Chris, because nobody talks about failure enough, and I love failure. With the teams that I work with, one of the first things we do is redefine failure, especially if they're involved at a big company, because failure is that dirty F word at a big company, and it's the thing that people get fired for. I guess F stands for fired, but if we can redefine failure as successfully learning what not to do, and then put it in the context of, well, it's only failure if we didn't learn, and it's only failure if we threw a lot of money at it that we didn't have to. Then all of a sudden failure becomes something that we can teach executives and people to celebrate. Hey, this team failed 4 times this week, which used to take us 4 years to do, and $4 million. So we can do those sort of things. That's exciting. But the kind of things you're talking about here are going to be some of those bad failures.
Well, these are, I mean, the examples I came up with, because I just thought, because this is, I guess, what got triggered by your thoughts about, the difference between starting a company and running one. The rabbit hole I went down was to come up with some of the big failures that.
I love it. Let's hear it.
And these were, I picked 3 simply, and we're talking about a time during the dot-com boom. So this is before Eric Ries writes his Lean Startup book. So I mean, I was around at the time, and I'm sure. I mean, with Simon being in the audience, I'm sure he can remember this too, and I'm sure you remember it, Bill. People were throwing a lot of money at these, startup wonderkinds, or who were kind of coming up with any old idea, and then the old sort of rule of thumb was that you spent loads and loads of marketing money or ad spend, and you spent loads and loads of money on that, and then eventually your product would catch up with you, because there was this big thing about first first mover advantage, where if you were out there first, then you swamped everybody and you succeeded because you killed off everybody before they could get started. And the examples I've got, I mean, there's one called Boo.com, which was an online fashion retailer. And they came up with this idea to have you could try things on virtually on a kind of mannequin that was like a piece of software. So you dressed the mannequin, you made the mannequin into your dimensions, and then you could try on the clothes on this piece of this avatar, if you like. And the problem was they never got the software to work. And they spent loads of money on having parties and flying around the world, and they got loads of money from kind of like VC money, I suppose, or investor money, and they just spent it on stupid things like hiring this massive super club, DJ space to have this enormous party. So they had a wild time. And then within about 6 months, they ran out of money, just at the point that they sorted out the problems with this avatar. But the reason everybody knows about it is there was a best-selling book written about it called Boo-hoo, which I thoroughly recommend to everybody if you get the chance. It was actually some Swedish people that started it, who originally had launched a website on writing poetry online, so they had no experience of running a fashion business. The second one was, I guess, known to everybody in the US as well, called Pets.com. And their problem was that they spent way too much money on advertising and marketing. So they did things like they spent money on a Super Bowl ad. They had this sock puppet, which was talking about the company. And so it was quite a clever idea. They'd use they'd get somebody dressed up as a sock puppet to go and interview people on the street about what they thought about Pets.com. And they even had a balloon in the Macy's Thanksgiving parade, which must have cost an absolute fortune. And the problem was that their revenue never caught up with how much they'd spent on marketing. So even if it was a good idea, they'd run out of money before they started. So, and the last one that I've come up with is this thing called Quibi. That's Q-U-C-I-B-I. sorry, yeah, QUIBI. And essentially, they thought it would be a good idea to get people to pay to watch video content on their phones. And they forgot that YouTube existed. So, essentially nobody paid for that service. And the reason I found that one is that apparently that's one of the biggest startup failures ever, because so much money was invested in making this thing work. So there we go. There's 3. But it just goes down to it also, I mean, now that we know that launching is much better if you do a lean startup, so that you're actually counting your pennies while you're launching, and not spending loads of money on frivolous marketing, which, and I guess, these days it's actually quite hard to break through, even if you spent a fortune. So it's actually not worth it until you've got something people want.
One of my slogans is, buying customers is the most expensive way to fail.
Yeah.
If you can't, in part of that process, what they call lean startup or design thinking or whatever you use, part of that process is iteratively working your way to the customer. You don't need a lot of marketing. You just need to prove that you've got a value proposition, and then it'll take care of itself in some ways. So it's just frustrating to see. And some of these people are just plain dishonest, I think. But like you said, going on international junkets and that kind of thing, they're just being poor stewards of their invested money. But they just had the thing backwards. They wanted to be a company before they actually had a business model. And
that's right.
That was the question back in the .com bust. It was, well, what's your business model? And they didn't even know what a business model was. It's like, well, make $1 million, sell $1 million, I guess.
Well, it was a gold rush, wasn't it? Really, so
it really was, and and then there was a crash, and that was it. And AI is probably heading for the same type of thing. I mean, history tends to repeat itself.
Yeah,
I feel like we're probably on the back of the hype curve right now, and we're maybe about to hit rock bottom. We'll see.
Well, and I guess blockchain was similar in the there was massive rush for cryptocurrencies, but often with these things, the technology behind the mad rush period is sound. Mm-hmm. And there will be good businesses that are built off the back of that technology, in the same way that there are e-commerce businesses that do well these days. So it wasn't that the World Wide Web was a terrible thing.
Yeah, innovation is the application of invention, and not every innovation is the right application. So it is iterative, and sooner or later someone will come up with something that works, but there's going to be a lot of wreckage in the meantime. Well, was that all of your big failures that you had off the top of your head?
Those are all the 3, but you had all these examples of experiments, didn't you, Bill, that we were going to go into? So
yeah, I had one other failure that I was thinking of.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
It was the globe.com. They were, I don't know if anybody remembers, on Yahoo they had something called GeoCities. It's where anybody could put their own little web page. In fact, it was my first website when I was working for a company, and I was one of the sales directors, and I put our page for our salespeople on. I was originally on GeoCities, and it was great. It was drag and drop web pages. Right at the turn of the century, well ahead of its time. Lots of flashing things and rotating GIFs and all the garish, awful things that people put on their websites, but it was wonderfully beautiful at the time, and and it worked. But again, it was free, the business model was free. Well, ad-supported internet never really actually worked. It was all actually sponsored by venture capital money, and once that ran out, the ad money just wasn't there. So pretty notable crash as well. But let's jump into the successes. I'll throw one out there, and then Chris, if you want to throw one out, and then we can go back and forth and dueling successes here.
Sure.
First one I had was a Dropbox, and some of you may remember Dropbox. Dropbox is the quintessential sort of archetypal poster boy for your first prototype doesn't have to exist to be able to understand whether or not you've got something that people will see as valuable. I mean, Dropbox just sent out an explainer video. They didn't necessarily tell people it didn't exist yet, but they were looking for, like, what they're calling beta testers or whatever else. But all they did is say, hey, here's what it does, here's how it works. So they showed how it might work, even though it wasn't working yet. And they got tons and tons of people to get on the wait list who were saying, take my money, please. At that point, it was very easy to get financing. And Chris, you and I and Simon as well get a lot of people saying, well, I'm looking for funding. I'm looking for funding. Well, do you have customers waiting to buy your product? Well, no. Well, then why would somebody want to invest in that? And Dropbox here did what they needed to do. They showed, hey, we have thousands and thousands of people ready to plunk down their credit card for a subscription, not just buy once, but for a subscription that's going to be sticky because they're going to keep their files here and then they're going to be stuck here with golden handcuffs. So this was a tremendous job for you. And a lot of tech people say, well, I can't show people my product till it's done. The answer is yes, you can. There's always a way to show them, and if it really is valuable to them, you can get feedback even before it's built.
Yeah, that's good. The example I found, and all of the examples I come up with, I can back up with some links that I can put in the comments after the show. I came across a product. I don't know whether you've heard of this, Bill. It's called KHA, KHA. And it's a series of beverages that are available for sale in the US, based on sea buckthorn, which I've never heard of. It must be some kind of berry, I think.
Okay.
And all they did was they said, hey, we're going to make these drinks. The drinks didn't exist. And they just had like a landing page. Yeah, they had a landing page for kind of, saying, hey, come and try our drink. So people signed up for that, and then it's apparently turned out to be a big success in the States. So a similar kind of thing. So the point being, it doesn't have to be a kind of software business to get to succeed using that kind of tactic.
Absolutely. I was at a market research conference doing a kind of a workshop for market research people because I was always trying to kind of introduce them to the really granular startup activities that are a lot like market research, but are working in ones and fives and tens instead of tens, thousands, 50,000s, and millions. And somebody in the room challenged me and said, well, I work for Coca-Cola, and we have to bottle it up, and we have to put it in a package, and we have to get it on store shelves, and then we have to. I said, no, you don't. And in my mind, this was easy for me, but it was hard for him to grasp. All you have to do is print up a whole bunch of stickers that fit on the end of the case, the case of the soda, and you go into the store. You get permission from the people at the store, and you put this sticker at the end of the case. And it says, instead of regular Coke, it says new tangerine Coke. It doesn't exist. But you put that sticker on the end, and then you stand in the aisle, try to be as, uncreepy as possible. But you stand in the aisle and you watch people get to the Coke section, and they see it, and you watch their reaction, and you watch them pull it out, and then you stop them. This is called, an aisle intercept. Hey, I see you chose the new Coke Tangerine. Yeah, I haven't heard before. That sounds really good. I love tangerine. You say, well, apologize. It's actually not a real flavor yet. We're just seeing if people like you be interested in it. Here's a coupon for a free case of Coke. Thank you so much for talking to us. And then you get that reaction, and now you can go back and say, look, I was there all week, and there were only 2 people that looked at it. Or I was there all week, and and there were 300 people that looked at it.
Yeah.
And now you can at least do some test marketing. You can spend some money on it, but you've got a case for it. You can do this with anything.
I came up with an idea that kind of, relates very much to what you just said, Bill. You might remember, I don't know whether they did this in the States, but about 25 years ago, Kit Kat, which is a type of chocolate bar, which I think is it's produced by Cadbury here, but in the States it's produced on license by Hershey. So you do have it over there. Yeah. They did the Kit Kat has always been the same. It's like this sort of crunchy wafer thing with chocolate covering, which is in kind of 4 bars, and you can break off each bar and eat one bar at one length of Kit Kat at a time. And they just tried in the mid-90s. They thought, well, what happens if we try out some new flavors? So they tried out that they just created for a month. They said, for a month, here's our new orange flavor. So you try that for a month, and because it's this new thing, it's only going to be around for a month, and then if it fails, then it disappears forever. But in fact, orange Kit Kat is a thing that people buy now. So that experiment must have gone well.
Yeah, and you create that at least the illusion of scarcity, limited time, limited number, whatever it is. Yeah, and I've seen some of those. I've seen some of those different colors. I'm a bit of a purist. I like the regular flavor, but some people are always out looking for something else, and it's great to be able to quantify. Hey, how many people is this? And a big company can get away with that. Chris, you had a good story about this experience you had at Reader's Digest a number of years back.
Oh yes,
we're getting close to the end. Maybe we'll finish up with that.
Okay, yeah. I in my sort of publishing career, I had a job as a freelancer, proofreading junk mail, and I don't know if people remember because it's not around now, but Reader's Digest's model was that it ran sort of like lottery prizes, if you like. It was like before the lottery was a big thing. You'd have these cash competitions where if you kept in the funnel by buying things, or by they'd offer you books, or they'd offer you different goods that they were selling, or maybe subscriptions to the magazine they used to have that used to come out. I think it was once a month. Then you were then into the next level of the competition. Then eventually there was a prize draw, and somebody went home with $1 million or £1 million, whatever it happens to be. And the guy in the UK who was the head of the prize competition, you'll never guess this. He had an amazing name. He was called Tom Champagne, which was brilliant for a person who that was his real name. And essentially what they used to do was that they were brilliant at direct marketing. And what they do is they try different versions of the same piece of junk mail, and it might have a piece of blue flashing at the top, or it might have there was a PS that they used to put in what looked like handwriting font in blue, and they'd send out these things to work out in very small batches to work out what the response rate was to these different versions of the same piece of junk mail. So you might have 12 different versions of the same piece of junk mail. And then depending on which one came back with the best results, they then bulk up that and scale it so that millions of people would get that piece of junk mail because that had the best result. And it turns out that if you do put a piece of blue flashing saying, you can win something, in the flashing, that actually made a big difference to whether people actually took that command, because it kind of drew people's attention. And also, and I guess this goes for direct mail now, if you actually put a PS and you color it in blue, people read that, and it's like a call to action, and it works. So if you're trying to get somebody to buy something off you, if you actually put a PS under your signature, people, and you put it in a different color and in a different font, that will probably work.
Well, and entrepreneurs can do the same type of thing at a small scale. You can come up with half a dozen different prototypes of your product, show it to people, and very, very quickly get that feedback. There's something also called sacrificial concepts, kind of in the design world, where we come up with a bunch of ideas, and we take out these ideas that we're not sure if there's going to be a reaction or not, but we can get them in front of customers very quickly, and they can tell us in real time, I like that, or I hate that, or I have no feeling about that. So, big companies can teach entrepreneurs important truths as well that they can take down to that granular level.
Yeah,
that's about our time together, Chris. Any other thoughts from you?
No, except that the ones that we didn't get to, maybe we should look at those next time, because
we got a bunch more.
We had a load more that we prepared. So
and then more successes. So no downers here. Just
we got a bit carried away. We got a bit carried away. So there we go.
Well, that's all right. These are great topics. Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you everyone for coming today.
Good to
really
see
appreciate
you.
it. See you next week.
Okay. Bye-bye.